You are now watching The Meech.
If you've been watching the channel since 2020, or especially 2022, you may have noticed that I've been way more positive towards Nintendo recently. I just did a Trash or Treasure episode about Mario vs. Donkey Kong, essentially defending a game that I find to be incredibly misunderstood. But the thing is, Nintendo hasn't done a lot to make me angry. The main thing they were doing that I absolutely despised was releasing unfinished games, then finishing them later with quote-unquote free updates. You could argue the games were never finished to begin with. Look at what happened with Mario Strikers Battle League. The updates that we got just added a few new characters and different colors for the grass. That whole game was a fiasco. Yeah, we can remember the whole argument from the fanboys, Nintendo games aren't unfinished, they're just incomplete, all day long, but at the end of the day, consumers caught on, and thankfully, we haven't gotten an unfinished Nintendo game since then. I won't deny, Nintendo isn't perfect, they've gotten a lot better, but things like Nintendo Switch Online, still garbage. Look at that Game Boy and Game Boy Advance lineup, there's barely anything there, and part of that really encourages emulation of those games, so you don't have to sit and wait around like a buffoon in order to play the Pokemon games from generations 1 through 3. And wouldn't you know it, emulation is more important than ever now, because Nintendo just took down Yuzu, a Nintendo Switch emulator. And in course, not only did they take down Yuzu, but they also took down Citra, which is a Nintendo 3DS emulator. Look, I'm all for Nintendo going after citric buffoons. They should have went after the annoying Orange, because remember, after he carelessly spit orange juice onto Mario's circuit, all the characters went spinning out, causing probably thousands worth in damage, and probably some of the characters are dead. But at the end of the day, they decided to go after Yuzu and Citra, and unfortunately, it's made a lot of people worried that this set a precedent for the future of emulation. So the main question is, with Nintendo going after Yuzu, and with Citra being a byproduct, should we worry about emulation going forward? And did Nintendo have the right to do so? And potentially, were they in the right? Here's essentially what happened. Nintendo went after Yuzu, and because of that, they agreed on a settlement, which ended support for Yuzu immediately, and Citra as well. The thing is, Yuzu is a Nintendo Switch emulator, and Nintendo Switch is Nintendo's current platform that they're still making new games for. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation about the Nintendo Switch too, but as of 2024, the Nintendo Switch is the current Nintendo platform, and what they saw it as was a threat. And the game brought up specifically was The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which apparently had over 1 million downloads on Yuzu. There's nothing wrong with emulation. It's perfectly fine to reverse engineer a piece of hardware in order to emulate it on different platforms. But the thing is, emulation can also be used for means of playing Nintendo Switch games if you don't own a Switch or own any of the official games. In other words,
pirate!
Unfortunately, that is just a byproduct of Yuzu in general. People are going to use it for that, though many are just using it to upscale their Nintendo Switch games and play them on their PC or Steam Deck, which is totally fine. But was it truly a threat to Nintendo? It sounds like 1 million people playing Tears of the Kingdom on Yuzu might be a big deal, but the fact of the matter is, the Nintendo Switch is Nintendo's best-selling console. It's the 3rd best-selling game system, period, and the games easily sell within the tens of millions. Nintendo is interested about making a statement, and the reason because of this is likely what happened with the Famicom. When the Famicom released, it was very easy to clone the hardware. So easy to the point where there were so many systems out there that they got a name, being Famiclones. These were most popular in countries that had developing gaming markets, most notably after the Soviet Union collapsed. You saw a lot of those consoles enter the market. Russia had the Steepler Dendy, and there were many other variations out there. You ever see games like 7 Grandad or Super Mario World for the Famicom? Well, the reason because they were made was not out of passion. It was not testing the capabilities of the Famicom. These games were designed to be sold in the Famiclone markets. That's why 7 Grandad is called 7 Grandad. It's a hack of Flintstones, The Rescue of Dino and Hoppy, where Mario replaces Fred Flintstone. And this was a common tactic back then. They'd trick consumers into thinking there were many Mario games out there, where they'd just hack the game and replace the main character with Mario. Super Mario Bros. 6, a hack of Tiny Toon Adventures that replaces Buster Bunny with Mario. Mario 16, a hack of Joe and Mac. Though I will admit, things like Super Mario World for the Famicom and Somari are quite admirable. The developers could have just found any random game and replaced Ronald McDonald with Mario, or other wacky things like that, but no, they decided to port games that wouldn't be available otherwise, which is super cool. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think Nintendo wanted a repeat of what happened with the Famicom, so with Yuzu, did they actually see it as much of a threat? Honestly, what happened with Tears of the Kingdom and just other games on Yuzu is mere droplets in an entire ocean. The fact that people are playing games on Yuzu, it happens, but it's such a relatively small market. You gotta keep in mind, a lot of the Nintendo Switch consumer base is more casual. They have no idea what Yuzu is, or emulation in general. But after looking into the situation with Yuzu, it wasn't just because it was a Nintendo Switch emulator. There was a lot more going on, where even profit was being made from it, which likely caught Nintendo's interest. But before getting into that, I'd like to share my thoughts on Nintendo Switch emulation, and Yuzu in general. I can see why people would want to use it. You can upscale Switch games to 4K, make them run better, and you can play them on the Steam Deck. I understand that, but it's not something I'm particularly interested in. When it comes to playing Switch games, I like to play the games on the Switch, on my TV, in my recliner, and I just love the experience of getting a physical game, opening it up, admiring the cartridge, and going from there playing the game. I know this is also a hot take, but I just prefer the console experience over gaming on PC, which is why I don't really emulate games on my PC. When it comes to emulation and homebrew, what I like to do is modify consoles and turn them into the ultimate console or handheld. Things like the 3DS, being able to play the Mario Kart Arcade Grand Prix games, ROM hacks. Now that's what I'm interested in. So I'm not too interested in Yuzu, but at the same time, I understand why a lot of people are. And it's unfortunate that it's being taken down. But the thing is, what was going on with Yuzu is they were locking features behind their Patreon, which is a no-go when it comes to emulation. In terms of emulation, the whole argument for it is that it's a great way to preserve games. So when you're locking stuff behind a paywall, is it really preserving much? Not only were they profiting from Yuzu, but another problem is that Nintendo games would often leak early, resulting in a problem for Nintendo, but also a problem for us as Nintendo fans. Unfortunately, what happens if a game leaks early is that spoilers get out before the game even releases, and you'll have to avoid spoilers like the plague. But unfortunately, sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it, because there are the scumbag YouTube channels out there that put all the bosses in the thumbnail. So that just ruins the experience for many players. Not only that, the entire thing surrounding spoilers has changed the way many play games. They'll rush through a game as quick as possible to avoid spoilers. I think YouTube needs a rule in place when it comes to these spoiler channels. They shouldn't allow the thumbnails at all. And with these channels, they suck, they're not creative, and they need to go away. I understand that leaked games are not a problem because of Yuzu, because they can also be played on things like a modded Switch. But the thing is, if you get an early copy of a game, just enjoy it. There's no need to spoil anything. Don't share it with the entire world. It's not worth having Nintendo go after you. Just have fun, and everyone else is going to be able to play the game soon after anyway. It's not worth the clout. It's not worth the 15 minutes of fame. Just ask the guy in Australia what happened with his early copy of New Super Mario Bros. Wii back in 2009. With Yuzu, it was handled poorly, nothing should have been monetized, and there's a reason why Nintendo went after him. I can't say I fully agree with it, but at the same time, there's nothing too surprising about it, and it's not like they just went after emulation in general. But this is where Citra comes into play, because remember, the Nintendo 3DS is no longer supported. In terms of Nintendo Switch emulation, now that I'm kinda iffy on. But if a console is no longer supported, emulate all you want. I'm absolutely in favor of emulation and homebrew when it comes to that. Things like emulation handhelds, modded Nintendo 3DS systems, all good with me. And Citra especially was great because I'm able to get footage from it, considering I don't have a Nintendo 3DS capture card, and it's great for that. But unfortunately, Citra was taken down as well. Was Nintendo actually interested in Citra though? I don't think so. Citra was just a byproduct of Yuzu, considering they were the same developers, so that's why Citra ended support in addition to Yuzu. Yuzu is pretty much all Nintendo cared about going after, and this has led a lot of people to worry that this set a precedent for the future of emulation. Should we be concerned? The entire situation with Yuzu was a lot of bad decisions. They were profiting from it, which is why Nintendo took action. You could argue that Nintendo also took action because it was a Nintendo Switch emulator, but if they just kept it at the emulation portion, didn't profit off of it, as well as have other problems, I think it would have been just fine. There's a reason why Nintendo hasn't gone after various Super Nintendo emulators, or NES emulators, even GameCube, and I guarantee you, if Citra wasn't associated with Yuzu, it would be just fine. Here's my stance in terms of emulation of Nintendo Switch games, or platforms that are no longer being supported. Switch games, iffy on that, but if a console is no longer supported, and games are no longer being sold for it, emulate to your heart's content. If something's not being sold, what is there to pirate? So have fun with your emulation handhelds, have a blast with your modded Nintendo 3DS, and emulate those games to your heart's content. I'm honestly mad about Citra being taken down way more than Yuzu. But the thing is, piracy can be a huge problem when it comes to game systems. Not so much for the Nintendo Switch, but we've seen it happen before with the Dreamcast and even the PlayStation Portable. And I do often wonder, with the influx of R4 cards, did that potentially take sales away from Nintendo DS games? Because remember, it's the second best-selling game system of all time, yet Pokemon Black and White 2 didn't even sell 10 million copies. So I often wonder, was that a byproduct of R4 cards? With Yuzu, it sucks that it was taken down, but there was a lot mishandled from Yuzu's part that it's not all too surprising, and I don't think it's one of the worst things Nintendo has ever done. I totally see why they did it, so the moral of the story, if you make an emulator, just don't profit off of it. I've seen it before with other emulators, where they lock certain features and even games behind a paywall, which just infuriates me. If it's for game preservation, then it should be just that. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and as always, keep calm and dada on.